Welcome to the In Shape Fitness Show. I'm Coach Kim. Thank you so much for joining me. Today we are doing a session called Shape-Shifting Movements. It's going to be about a 20-minute session that's designed to move your body in multiple dimensions, multi-dimensional sort of compound movements and circuits that you'll be able to do without any equipment. You don't even need shoes. And along with it, I'm going to tell you another story from the book that I just wrote called Darwin on the Treadmill. So, the reason to exercise has more to do with how you get to enjoy your life than it does with any number on your scale in the bathroom or on your pant label. Multidimensional movements are really important. They're vital to your ability to live life to its fullest, because you think about it, if you're just jumping on a treadmill or a bicycle or an elliptical machine in the gym, and that is your sole form of exercise that is very singular in its movement. And over time, you sort of close down some of the interesting intricacies of the human body that allow you to do a little bit of rotational movement and reaching movement and squatting movement and those kinds of movements that allow you to enjoy things like hiking and playing with kids and kicking around a ball maybe and throwing a frisbee on the beach. All those types of things that are really important to living a long time, healthy life. So let's get started with a quick postural systems check where you stand up really tall in the middle of your floor. You need about the size of a yoga mat space. We are going to be in all of the sort of regular human dimensions where you're standing up, where you're flat out on the floor in prone or push-up position, and where you're lying down face up on the floor. Your arms should be able to extend out to the sides. And I think that's about it. But with the postural systems check, all you want to do is think about your body, where your body is in space, and your posture. Deviations of your posture, of good anatomical posture, are rampant in our sedentary lifestyles. So what you want to do is think about the placement of your feet, using all four corners of each of your feet, instead of pressing just onto the heels or just into the middle part of the inside part of your feet. Most right-handed and left-handed people have different dominant weak leg imbalances, so think about that as well. And then as you travel up your body, think about the butt muscles and hamstrings, and give those a little tug. Quads are there in the front of your body, your thighs, and you can squeeze those guys a little bit. Then make sure that your hip flexors are fully elongated, and the way that you do that is by tucking in your tailbone and then lifting up as you breathe in. Kind of lift through the rib cage. Make sure that your shoulders are back and that your tummy muscles are zipped up. And now, take just a couple of seconds to breathe deeply 3 times. Inhale deeply through your nose. Exhale completely through your mouth. And again, inhale through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. As you're inhaling with that last big breath, lift your arms up above your head and press your palms together above your head. If you can press your palms together where you sort of glue your palms together, no air's getting through, you have this great range of motion through your shoulders, and you will feel the stretch through the sides of your body. You can wiggle your body a little bit to the right and to the left with your fingertips pointing slightly in either direction, just to feel a little bit more of that stretch through your torso. Those soft tissues of the spine, the vertebra, are connected via those discs, right? You've probably heard a lot about. In fact, 85% I think of adults have some sort of back problem at a particular time. And a lot of that has to do with the degenerative situation in your discs, which speaks to the lack of movement or the improper movement of your spine. So stretching up is always really good. And then I want you to land with your arms out to the sides, palms facing down, fingers splayed, flingers, right? So splay those phalanges and wiggle your fingers a little bit just to feel all of the bones in your hand. Feel those little muscles in your lower arms as you flex each of your fingers. Really, really helpful to make sure that you don't end up with wrist fatigue once we're on the floor. and then keep those arms extended out to the sides. Now, you're going to start to feel the heaviness of your arms, right? 5 to 8 or so pounds worth of flesh that you have to hold up through that kinetic center you have called your trunk. Keep your back straight, keep your tummy muscles pulled in. And now you're going to keep the arms out. Don't let them drop. Take a breath. Bring your feet into a heel to toe position. And then turn your head. The only movement, this is called the lighthouse, is to turn your head to the right and then turn your head to the left. Slowly back to the right and then again to the left. And then switch your feet so that the other foot is towards the rear. Again, it's heel to toe, so both feet face forward, but one foot is directly in front of the other. And then keep those arms up. I know they're heavy. They get heavy after just a few minutes. It's crazy that people think that they need all this heavy weight attached to their hands in order to get a decent weight workout in, when the reality is the largest majority of American adults could utilize just their body parts to do every single thing that they need to do. We just, we want to believe that we need something else. We want to believe as consumers that we have to get something in order to make it work. But I'm here to tell you, you don't. With the internet and these kinds of programs, there are lots of similar ones, by the way. There is so much evidence that shows your body weight is really sufficient in terms of the majority of the work that you need to do for willful exercise. Okay, now what I want you to do is one more big exercise to warm up your body a little bit. I think you think I'm going to have you do jumping jacks, but I'm actually going to have you do something called a standing bicycle crunch. Maybe we'll do some jumping jacks afterwards just for fun. But with a standing bicycle crunch, you now extend your legs out pretty wide, like about double shoulder width apart, and then extend your arms above your head. If you're getting sort of the gist of something here, one of the major things I'm trying to get you to do is open up your body, open up your chest. So by arms out, you pull back on the chest. By arms up and out, in that big X form that you're going to be doing for the standing bicycle crunch, once again, you have to open up your chest. And that helps you efficiently breathe, right? It actually adds some production capacity to your lungs and your respiration. That's really, really important when you're going to be moving in multiple directions. Your heart rate is going to elevate and it's going to stay up once we get started with these circuits. So with your elbows, with your arms up and out and your legs out, you're going to bring your elbow to the knee, the opposite knee in front of your body. So left elbow, right knee, squeeze the tummy muscles, then stretch back out. And then alternate with the right elbow and the left knee. So get started for 30 seconds, standing bicycle crunch. Your time starts now. I'm sure you're very excited to hear about Mad Jack Churchill. I was researching a number of different characters in history that I was trying to find that really embodied kind of the, multidimensional movement. I mean, in history, I've found, and that's why the book is written this way, that there's so many human stories of the way people live their lives, and they are not, they're not super strange or special. They're just regular people that did regular things. But in centuries before where we are right now with our sedentary lifestyles, those regular activities were really the things that kept them healthy. And now we have this sort of ability to live longer lives, but because we're largely living them sitting in a chair, the quality of our life is decreasing, and it's really sad. Okay, now let's finish up with a couple of jumping jacks. It took you about 45 seconds through those standing bicycle crunches, by the way. So let's go 30 last seconds, and then we're going down to the floor. So jumping jacks for 30 seconds. Go ahead and get started. When we do go down to the floor, I'm going to have you do a couple of cat camels, and then we're going to do a circuit that includes mountain climbers, push-ups, side planks, downward dog, and upward facing dog, and then child's pose. You can stick a child's pose anywhere into a circuit. It's always good when you're on the floor, for circuits on the floor. All right, last jumping jack. Take a couple of deep breaths, and then go ahead and drop down to your knees and put your hands on the floor. So we're going to get into quadruped position. We're going to do one full circuit facing down for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to do a circuit facing up. That's going to include a roll up, hip bridges, and a tabletop. So you're facing the floor at this moment. And if you're in quadruped, that means that your shoulders and your hands line up vertically, and it means that your hips and your knees line up vertically. Now, for cat camels, it's a great way to fully limber up your back. We did actually do a pretty good warm up here, but go ahead and drop your head like a bowling ball, round up your spine like a scared cat. Do a couple of those as you're thinking about the adjustments that you want to make sure you make if you need to for the circuit. So the things that make a big difference within the scope of your ability to really benefit from these kinds of workouts is being able to be on the floor. Number one is really helpful because when you're on all fours, you're forcing the trunk to really be the nucleus of your kinetic energy, to really push your oxygenated blood and fluids out to your limbs in multiple directions. When you're standing up, gravity really helps get fluid down to your lower limbs. When you are on all fours, your heart is having to work a little bit harder, and you're having to, because of the plank position that we're going to get into in just a couple of seconds, you're going to feel that isometric contraction, the sort of multi-dimensional isometric contraction of the muscles that line your rib cage, your deep abdominal muscles, the side abdominal muscles, the front and the back muscle all work together as a team. And that teamwork is really, really helpful for you in terms of your metabolic output and your energy. So let's get started with mountain climbers. So we're going to just do a 30-second circuit of each of the moves. And then as we do the sort of round robin, for like 2 minutes, then we'll break, and then we'll do it another 2 minutes. We will, I'll start telling that story about Mad Jack Churchill. Okay, so with mountain climbers, you're on your hands, and then you lift up off of your knees, and you bring one knee in up underneath the chest as you're sort of jumping your feet forward and back in a moving motion with your hands stable. Really important. You go ahead and get started. Let's start the clock for 30 seconds. And the thing you want to do is make sure that your shoulders and your hands stay lined up. If you find that your shoulders are kind of creeping backwards, that means probably your butt is lifting upwards. And the reason that your butt wants to go up is because if your butt lifts up, then there's less pressure on your torso, less isometric contraction taking place that allows you to, or forces your trunk to work harder. So that's one thing. The other thing is that you can adjust this pacing in any way that you need to for your ability level. If it needs to be easier, walk 1 foot at a time. You've got 5 more seconds. Very good. Okay, now just 30 seconds of push-ups, including the time where you're getting ready and feeling good and thinking about whether you can do them on your toes or do them on your knees. Either way is fabulous, doesn't matter. But with push-ups, you want to make sure that your hands, once again, line up with your shoulders vertically. And then you want to make sure that you have widened your hands to such an extent that you activate the chest muscles and use your back, not just your biceps and your triceps. So you can move your hands a little bit to make yourself comfortable so that you can continue doing as many of these as you can in 30 seconds. And your time is going, so go ahead and get started. You inhale on your way down, you exhale as you lift back up. If you're doing push-ups on your knees, which is perfectly fine, you want to make sure that you're resting on that fleshy part of the bottom of your quad, not your knee bone. And again, keep your butt down. All right. Now, what did I say? What else did I say? Side planks. Okay, so with side planks, and I often do these on my elbows, but since we're doing most of this stuff on your hands, you're going to need to make a decision if you want to drop to your elbow in order to lift into a side plank. And this is more like a rotational reach. We're not going to stay in the side plank for very long, but you do want to make sure that you keep the limb lined up with the shoulder that's facing down, and that the limb that faces your ceiling or the sky is directly facing up. You don't want to hyperextend and go too far. And obviously you want to go far enough. So a couple of those on either side. And then from side planks, we're going to go into a downward facing dog, which is where your hands are back on the floor and your butt is now high in the air in making a triangle with your body. Your butt is right up in the air at that apex, and you feel this stretch down the back of your leg and the calf, hopefully a little bit. And then you shift your body weight from, we call this a dynamic dog actually, where you lift from downward dog and then you go into upward facing dog, where you swing your hips, lowering your legs almost to the floor, but they don't rest there. Your hands are still flat on the floor. Spider-Man the floor, by the way. This is also really helpful. You want to mash into the floor. Don't want to mash into the floor with the heel of your hand. That fatigues your wrist. Now rest in child's pose. Okay, so now the circuit is going to be mountain climbers, and just go to a count of 4 with moving your legs. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then pause. That's a mountain climber. Then 1 push-up. Then a side plank to either side. 1 side plank to the right, 1 side plank to the left. Back to facing the floor. Downward facing dog, upward facing dog, back into child's pose whenever you need to stretch. All right, so your 2 minutes starts now. So I really love telling these stories about the characters that I researched and found for this book, because I don't read exercise books. In fact, being the owner of an exercise business is interesting because I've been sort of fed lots of information about how, you need to read up more on running a business. You need to read up on running a women's owned business. You need to read up on running a small business. You need to master certain elements of all these different facets of actually running a business. And then there's this other sort of camp of professionals in my work that are constantly reading up on all of the fitness crazes that are out there, and sort of fine tuning the craft, which in my opinion, I do, but I also find quite boring. What is interesting to me is what people did in the past, which is why last week I talked about Queen Elizabeth and Queen Mary, and why, or the week before last. And last week I talked about Darwin on the Galapagos tortoises. And today, Mad Jack Churchill is interesting to me. He was known as Fighting Jack, and he was this handsome, well-educated British soldier. You, by the way, have less than 1 minute to go for the first of the 2-minute circuits. Mad Jack Churchill served in the armed forces in the Manchester unit, and then he was in Burma, and then he actually left military service to become a model and a film actor, and this was in the 1930s and 40s. So finish up your circuit, lie in child's pose for about 15 seconds, and take deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. But he was really skilled at the bow and arrow as an archer. He was in the French village in 1940, where ground troops were mostly using rifles and grenades by this point. The physical demands of archery, in conjunction with the sort of more assured impact of the newer weaponry that was popular at the time, harkened the demise of bows and arrows in combat. I mean, this is kind of the way of the way things went around the world. But the peering into the history for the glimpse of this physical strength it takes to successfully commandeer this piece of equipment is interesting from a multi-dimensional exercise standpoint. So that's why we're looking into Mad Jack Churchill today. Let's get started with that second 2-minute circuit. I want to make sure that you turn over and get a circuit on your back as well. So go ahead and get started. You've got 2 more minutes to go. So Jack was an eccentric man. It wasn't really a typical soldier in the early 20th century. His military training had begun traditionally. I think he probably came from this long line of soldiers from his family. But the physical regimens of early mustering, rule following, the battery of physical skills that they did at those times. Physical training, including marching and line formations, lots of obedience training, physical commands like push-ups and burpees actually came about because of the obedience training that was related to military style training of the time. I presume it still is, but actually I don't honestly know all that much about how military soldiers are trained these days. But the specialty training followed, and that was when at the Royal Military Academy that Churchill would have taken up the bow and arrow. Now, a longbow is this wooden weapon that was actually, it predates obviously our time. It goes back to medieval times, and of course was used well into the 20th century. Then it became mixed with all these other guns, pistols, and shotguns, and cannons, and bombs for the mortal combat uses. But the longbow's size varied based on its user, and the factor that differentiated it between a standard bow and arrow. I don't know why I have a hard time saying that. Was that the archer's pull on the cord had to apex or meet really close to the face, which gave it that much more power. It could actually draw 90 to 110 pounds of force. So an accurate aim could immobilize an enemy and kill it, potentially, a person. Stronger bows could inflict death for certain, but they undoubtedly required the archer to be strong enough to employ this kind of an instrument with that much accuracy. Now turn your body over and lower your body or lower your torso back down to the floor, where you're lying on the floor now with your knees bent and your feet are flat on the floor. Okay, now you're going to lift up into hip bridge. And in hip bridge, we find ourselves thinking, this is easy. Not so hard, the hip bridge, but I'm going to have you stay here as I continue the story. What I want to make sure that you're doing, though, is making sure that the bridge is correct, because I see mistakes in bridges all the time, where your ankles and your knees line up vertically. I'm very big on vertical alignment, as you can probably tell, and that your feet are straight and your toes are down. You don't want your toes to lift up. What happens when your toes lift up, and you can go ahead and do this just to get a feel for it, if your toes are in the air and your heels are mashed down into the floor, the work that's being conducted in your body is centered around your quads, your thighs, and your back. But press your toes into the floor and kind of let up on the heels a little bit. You'll feel the back of the leg engage, the butt, and your hamstrings. It's really good. All right, so just hang here as I continue. All right, now, by the time of Henry VIII, the longbow, it was actually a requirement by law that all males be trained in the use of the bow and arrow so that they could practice archery regularly from an early age. And given the nature of political unrest and imperialism, all the warfare, the boys as young as 5 and 6 were trained to take up their arms, take up the bow and arrow, often made from a yew tree or a springy tree. They would have been so much easier, and they were also cheaper to make than swords and other weapons that are made from metal. But the bow and arrow is interesting because your posture, erect posture and balance, your lower limb strength, and your hip flexibility. Not to mention, of course, core strength, and then the upper body movement and strength through your chest and your shoulder and your back are all components that are in action during one single pull and release of an arrow along a bow. Now with your hip bridge, you're going to lower your butt down and lift back up. That's a simple dip. And maybe because I've had you hold in the position for about a minute, you feel this a little bit more, but this is generally pretty easy for people, just a dip down and lift back up. I have a 90-year-old client I see in New York City, and he can do these very easily. Momentum builds, of course, and gravity helps out a little bit, but what you can do to make this a little bit harder is lift up one leg and perform these dips on your individual legs and just do the same number on each side, right? Because if you're right-handed, it's going to be really easy on the right leg. If you're left-handed, it's going to be harder on your left leg, but it's equally important to do the same number on both legs so that you can equilibrate the dominant and weaker side of your body. So these are the dips. These are the bridge dips, really important. The next thing that I want you to do is a roll-up, which involves straight legs. It involves arms over your head to start, and then it involves your being able to sit up into an L. Now, that might be too hard. If you cannot sit up into an L, what you should be doing is taking a couple of steps to get to the point where you can do that, because you should be able to sit up without pushing your hands down and pushing off of the floor. But if you can only do this while I'm talking again about bows and arrows and Mad Jack Churchill, what I want you to do is to lift your head and tuck your chin to your chest, and then lower your head back down. And then if you also take the time to lift up your legs and lower them back down, that is another sort of way to build the strength, the connection between the front, the top part of your body in the front, and the lower part strength, the hip and lower torso part of your core. That would be great. But the roll-ups are also perfectly suitable for that entire sort of chain reaction of strength that you need through the front of your body. As you're rolling back, you just want to make sure that you're moving very, very slowly. So those are the roll-ups. Then if you're in the L seat, so now if you have been doing the chin tuck and the leg lifts, you can stop now and then just get yourself up into the seated position. So what you'll have to do is figure out how to transition from that modification to the L seat, which is where your legs are straight in front of you and you're sitting up. Now you put your hands on the floor beside your butt with your fingers facing forward, and you lift your body up into a tabletop. And as you do that, you bend your knees and put your feet on the floor, facing the floor, obviously, and press in with your toes so that you lift your torso up and support yourself with the back of the body. And that is your tabletop. Then you can sit back down, practice a few more of those. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about bows and arrows as we continue. I'm going to add a little bit of twisting in so that we get a little bit of that diagonal dimension into our workout. And then we're going to end on your feet with a couple of lunges, which help you interact with gravity and, again, also build strength through your hips and your quads and your glutes. All right. So you can do the circuit now. I think you're ready, where you do one hip bridge, then you straighten your legs out. You can do them individually on your legs if you want, and then straighten your legs out, lie all the way down, do one roll up, and once you get into the L seat, lift your body up into tabletop, then put your butt back down on the floor, and then lay back down. 2 minutes, go ahead and get started. Experts are in archery experts say that the archer's body should face about 90 degrees from the target. Your forward foot points towards the target. The back leg is perpendicular. The back foot, rather, is perpendicular. The lower body has to be stable. That means that it demands the cooperation among the tissues inside your body. The bones, obviously, but also the muscles and your tendons and your ligaments and fascia. You can't lock your knees, for example, because that thwarts the kinetic energy that you need to drive down to your lower body. And then your trunk needs to twist as you pull on the string in order for the power to be exerted through the kinetic center of your body, up through your shoulder and out through the lower part of your arm, your hand, through the bow itself. So hunting with a bow and arrow could be even harder. Military combat can be even harder because you're hiding and crouching, you're squatting down and springing into position quickly, tracking a person or if you're a hunter, an animal over wild terrain. And that was one of the reasons why Mad Jack Churchill had such this notoriety as he was in combat in World War II. This was during World War II when this last supposed use of the longbow took place. Now for the final just minute or so of our session, I want you to stand back up onto your feet, shake it out a little bit, and let's get into a couple of positions related to lunging, which relate to bow and arrow use. Not that I have any intention of pulling you into archery as an activity. I live in New York City. I can't even begin to imagine. I'm sure there must be archery experts around that can teach you how to use an instrument like that. But just from a regular purpose, being able to take a giant step forward and then lower the body straight down into a lunge is somewhat risky if you have knee issues. So you've got to be careful. If you need to hold onto a wall or the back of a chair, definitely do that. If you don't think that a deep knee bend is in your future, don't do it. Bend slightly. You can start with just a little bit of motion down and up, and then use, sitting into a chair or some other form of interacting with gravity so that you can build that elevated heart rate condition and help your body experience the benefits of that type of motion without torquing or risking the joints in your body that might be compromised already. So forward lunges, you take a big step forward, and then you bend both of your knees, and then you push off of the front leg back into your standing position, and then alternate. And now the really fun thing to do is when you add a bit of a curtsy in. And that's the last suggestion that I'm going to make in order to help build a little bit of that multi-dimensional movement, whether it's forward curtsying or rear curtsying or combination of both of those things, which I do lots with group workouts that we do and with private clients that I see, whether you can actually take your right leg, which is stable, and then your left leg you can move forward. You can move into the forward curtsy, which is where you step forward and to the right. You can extend the left leg out to the left for a side lunge. And then you can go back into a rear lunge and then a rear curtsy for 5 lunges just on one leg, and then switch. Those are super hard, really burn the lower part of your body, and elevates your heart rate all the while. As you finish that last minute or so of movement, let me just say that whether you are interested in some sort of multidimensional activity like, soccer or tennis or archery, having the ability, making your gym exercise experiences, your willful exercise experiences, ensure that you are waking up the dormant muscle groups that you have in your body because of your sedentary lifestyle are really, really important. So if you have a question about an activity and how to prepare for that activity, please let us know at InShape. We'd be happy to design a program for you. Mad Jack Churchill is definitely no longer part of our society. There are probably very few people that could head out and sort of carry this piece of equipment with them and use it and use it with accuracy. That's an art that is long gone, but it's great to be inspired by it, and that's why we bring the history into our present as we teach these lessons through the InShape Fitness Show, and hopefully you'll pick up my book once it's published. It's called Darwin on the Treadmill. I'm so glad that you joined us this afternoon, and I will be back again with another new episode of the InShape Fitness Show soon. Have a great day.